Can you guys hear me now? Hopefully the audio is working. Awesome. Oh, hope you guys are having first week of the year. Went by pretty fast. Lots of stuff happening. But what I'm really excited about is at least being able to share art. I think this is kind of one of my favorite things about what this organization and this community is rallied around has really been the quality of our pixel art and the pixel art team that we've consistently been building over the last 18, 24 months. It's actually crazy. We were last night just looking through all of the art that we have kind of created, and it's quite massive. There's quite a few worlds, there's quite a bit of layers, and there's quite a bit of opportunities. So what we want to kind of do today is just walk through a little bit and remind ourselves on the pieces that we've been building, so that there's like a fun refreshment of art, but also at the same time we're going to talk about just some of the options kind of moving forward, right? And I think this is kind of why I'm so excited about web 3 in general, is that there's so many different ways to grow a product, to scale a product, and of course unlock for each and every one of you guys. So with our pixel art, and we've had this 5-man team for, geez, it's been now 24, almost 24 months, or like 21 months. We've really been trying to understand what would be the best way to build not only generative art, but the secondary worlds and game worlds around it as well. And that really all started around one IP, which was Lost Realms. Lost Realms was the inception point for this entire world. And, it was really cool because Lost Realms was going after a lot of the games that we were inspired by as kids. So, if you were in there in the early days, you might have loved early Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger, or a little bit later in life, you may have come across games like Heroes of Might and Magic. And these were like really powerful games to us that we felt like, hey, how can we kind of reincorporate this into the world that we're building, right? And how do we scale that accordingly as well to kind of make it feel fresh, feel very new, feel very amazing? And none other than our boy Gokche and team really started to work against this, right? They were starting to think, how can we bring all these layers together? And, it started off with just some simple logo designs. It then started into some of the visuals of the world. We were trying to think through what is the actual items that we want, how do we create beautiful visual scenes for our users. But also what became really fun was just understanding how can the major market get excited about a new brand that's born from web 3. And that's always been like a very interesting challenge, right? It's thinking through, how do you get users to understand and value this more than just its trading value, right? And it usually means connecting people with the art. And that's kind of what we set out to do with this world in Lost Realms. And it led to us creating a lot of also amazing animations as well. A lot of the animations were really trying to help us open up the world. And probably one of the best, animations to kind of set this was what we called the beginning. This is kind of where all the art started. I'm going to drop it right now here in chat. And this was just kind of the entire vibe of what the Lost Realms franchise would be. The idea that you'd have, multiple characters, you have a world that you want to kind of go after. When you look out into the world, you're going to see this Druck, the dragon, that is going to be your enemy. You're going to see the castle that you need to probably go get back. It's kind of that storytelling, right? And I love that we are starting to create and open this out into this world. And when you remember Lost Realms initially, right, was built for a game experience. Our thinking specifically around Lost Realms was to be a turn-based RPG game. And we were actually building the entire economy around an ERC20 token framework at this time. And we thought it was really compelling, really exciting. And then, of course, Black Swan events happen and FTX occurs. FTX essentially occurs around 2 weeks before our targeted launch date. And what you saw kind of overnight, this world of ERC20 games just collapsed, and most of the NFT market collapsed as well. It was pretty much a really large shock. So, for us, we had all these amazing characters that we were building and we wanted to scale the IP. We even had like partnerships with quite a few different brands. For example, here, let me grab some maybe Forgotten Runes. Let's maybe grab one of the Azukis. Let's grab one of the Gojiras and Rumble Kong League. And I could drop these here. And then this is kind of where you could see where these characters were starting to form, right? And these were generative, right? And beautiful, beautiful playable characters was kind of the initial thinking here as well. Yeah, we still got OG Ether Orcs out there. We got some other OG characters within that world. And this is kind of where then Lost Realms, really had its functional opportunity to be a game, but the market essentially eroded that. So we kind of had to go back into our playbook, right? And start thinking about, okay, if we can't go directly into a game launch, right, then what can we actually build that the market would want to scale, right? And what was actually really interesting at that point, and this was already true in the previous bull run, and what we had seen is the market was just really rallying around PFPs, right? The PFP concept was just clearly the most valuable thing in that market. And the truth was, Lost Realms was not built to be a PFP, right? These are playable characters that you would be minting. Really cool looking playable characters, as we've noted above. But it wasn't really going to be that visual representation as strong as we wanted for a PFP. So we felt like this would be a really good opportunity for us to maybe extend this world. So what we started to do is that we started to extend this world in both ways, both in terms of the long-term side, but also in the near-term side. And on the near-term side, what did we really unlock? It was the idea of introducing then King's Oath, right? This was the thought process of let's add a prequel layer that sets up this world first, right? And in doing so, we could then start kind of maybe getting, this idea of a PFP in, which could be really cool. And, this is kind of one of the King's Oaths that we kind of had initially kicked out. This one's got a little anthem to it. If you play it, it's got a little bit of music, which I always loved. Just gave a little bit more of a touch point here, but it really started to open up the world of, okay, where can we take these characters towards? And this is probably the most fun thing then that Gokce and our team started to work on. It was this idea of how do we create a PFP that still fits in the same world, but maybe has a slightly different visual or look, has a slightly different understanding and update, but also still felt really fresh as a PFP. And that was kind of like the big thing here is that we wanted to get a few elements. So we tossed out a couple of them here, right? Which is pretty cool. And, we started to realize like, wow, these PFPs feel very different. They have a sense of animation, they have a sense of just a little bit more feeling of where this world is. And the story was in King's Oath, we would be resurrecting the old kings, right? So then we also brought in voice acting, right? We're starting to bring in quite a few other elements that came in to really make this world feel way more full, right? And that's kind of where I think Tribe and where Lost Realms has been really successful, has been thinking through how do you actually unlock and build characters, right? And really level them up, right? How do you actually bring them to a world where they can connect? And that's kind of where the storytelling kind of came in. So when we think more about the storytelling, right, what we also started to do, we started to do crazy stuff. We started to, search for the tombs. If you remember that, you had to go find these tombs in the world for us and discover this here as well. And then we had these beautiful animated scenes of these worlds, right, and characters that just started to open up and share a little bit more of what we're doing. We also did other crazy stuff, which I thought was really cool. we started to do, if you remember, the secret chamber came to life, right? The secret chamber started writing letters and codes on the wall. And one of the things that many people don't, we don't really talk about, but what's actually really cool is that the entire Lost Realms franchise, right, has its own written language, right? It's a completely created, brand new language that we created for the entire Lost Realms world. So when you look at what's on this wall here, you can see like, oh wow, like those are totally different scripts. I've never seen that before in my life. So that's kind of really cool. We just started to expand, and then, also we started to add voice acting, right? We started to have, the idea of where we brought in a voice actress to work on the Oracle's voice, right? The initial Queen Celeste, which was really cool. And then we started to create more of these tombs. This is one of my favorite tombs. This is the Demon Tomb. Again, just beautiful pixel art. If you open this up and look into this, you're just seeing like subtle smoke. You're seeing the eye. Like, wouldn't this be like one of the most insane tombs that you would ever want to be a part of as well, right? And I think this is kind of what we're trying to tap into, is this kind of storytelling, because what are we very much influenced, kind of Senator A00813 saying, it's the idea of like, Lord of the Rings was the most largest influence here as well, right? Which I think is great. And I think very similarly, I know it's booby. I didn't want to say booby, guys. I was trying to be the professional here in Senators 800813's name. But in that world, right, what was really cool was, we were starting to open up the storytelling, and this then led to us opening up quite a few kings, and we started to experiment with a lot of stuff. We were actually experimenting with comics really early. This is a comic done by a totally different comic book artist way in the early days. Like, this is actually such a cool visual. This is the dwarf tomb hidden inside a volcano, right? And this is the idea that they're marching their tomb up, right, into into its last march, right, once the dwarf king had died, right? And just really cool visual. You're seeing light coming in, a lot of elements here, just really cool. And then, yeah, Rain starts going into some of the other details, is that we started to like expand, right, the characters and their weapons onto King's Oath. So you could see all these elements for King's Oath and Lost Realms world kind of be built up quite a bit. And that's kind of what unlocks us for this really large storytelling around the Lost Realms franchise. It has voice acting, it has PFPs, it has playable characters, right? Yeah, Rain just shared one of my favorite versions of the Kings. I think this is one of the coolest cloaks here, and it has one of the weirdest weapons I've ever seen in my life. Oh, which is it's a petrified giant finger. It's what we have. So it's like this staff. So on the bottom of the finger, it's like a sharp point. So yeah, why not take a petrified giant's finger as one of the things, right? So what I think is really cool, right, is that what we're really excited about here is that this franchise is available to us, and it gives us a lot of opportunity on where we want to go and where we want to scale. But it all comes down to our amazing art team, right? Our amazing pixel art team continues to kind of knock this out. So there's other elements of Lost Realms that we haven't shared. We could share. It's stuff like there's a whole world map created for the first Lost Realms world in pixel art. There's a whole bunch of traits. There's a whole bunch of generative characters. Not only do we have a full King collection PFP, but for the actual playable characters in any kind of product experience, we've created, I think, over 40 unique characters, 45 unique characters that are all generative, which is also really cool. And the vision of this world still has an element of gamification to it that we're still very bullish on. And what we're now thinking through are interesting ideas of how do we want to set into this, right? Rain's also showing one of the one of ones in in the PFP collection for King's Oath. This is the dwarf Kraken King somehow. We don't know how he became this way, but he is quite insane. And just like this animation is still pretty nuts. Yeah, so Crypto Goku asks, is King's Oath still going to be a factory NFT? That's honestly what our intention is. We actually are really thinking through the entire Lost Realms franchise to be that factory like structure where there's a primary asset and then it yields ongoing assets as well. What we're now trying to think through is what is the right way of creating those yields, right? And I think that kind of leads to a lot of interesting questions, right? Reishi showing like what could long-term raids look like against the Magma Lord boss in this case. And this is a great visual that he's showing here, right? Oh, it's a low res one. I'll try to get you a high res one later. But it actually shows you like all the other characters we have in the world. And we've been doing a lot. One of the things that was also cool is that we were always experimenting, probably experimenting too much, as we already know. But, we have these beautiful Tree of Life. We have all these other visuals here. But the other cool thing that we started to experiment on as well was the idea of like physicals, right? Is that the idea is how do we give a pretty cool experience where these characters start coming to life. So again, this might not be the best visuals here. I'll just grab a couple that I can see in one of my files because it's all over the place. Here we go. There are a couple here. Oh, I think one picture is going to show up sideways. But these are the actual first runs of the initial toys from the Lost Realms franchise. So we had like three different characters. We had an archangel, a minotaur, and then kind of the draconian demon here as well, which is really cool. And we were trying to think through how do these pieces almost feel like Warhammer, right? Or in that world, which is really cool. So we wanted to kind of build these kind of small like visuals. I think these are all around 5 inches tall, so they're a little bit bigger. We could even go smaller, like 3 inches tall. So we think there's some really cool things we could do here as well, because that's also, I think, the beauty of Lost Realms. If we were going to step back and tell you why we're most excited about Lost Realms, it's the fact that, if I'm looking at everything, it's realizing that we've always made sure that Lost Realms can kind of push through, right? Push through in this market. And in pushing through, right, what we're most excited about here, it's recognizing that, we need to especially put an emphasis on how can this art go into all these, different worlds, and where can we start getting unlock stuff here, right? And that's going to be now our big challenge, right? As we talk to you guys, is how do we prioritize this? How do we layer this out? And I think there's a lot of cool things that we can do. And we've been experimenting with this too. So, like, for example, we were looking at what if Lost Realms was a trading card franchise in the future? What would that be, right? And I think this is going to be like an important thing. So, here's just like a couple ways of where these visuals would look like in if there were a card game, right? Which is kind of interesting. Just try to open up your mind. We're not saying we're building a trading card game. It's trying to give you the surface area for the franchise. And I agree, Saita says, right, we just need to start getting stuff out now. And I think this is going to be that part of that conversation, is understanding what do we want to get out, right? What do we want to scale? Where do we want to, push this forward? That's going to be a lot of the interesting ideas and opportunities that are kind of still behind the scenes. So, what else can we be doing here, right? Well, one thing we're now trying to do, right, is we're trying to scale up to understand what's the next best launch for you guys as a community. Again, all of our launches are free mints, right? Which is really important. We're not looking to extract here. What are we really trying to look at? We're trying to build something way larger. Thor asks us, how do you scale a board game? I don't know if you could scale, quote unquote, the board game, perhaps, right? It's rather scaling the idea of the IP into new verticals. So, right, like what would be interesting is that what if you got to own your character and that character could then be reflected in a turn-based RPG game, or a trading card game, or a physical board game. What would rights look like, and how would you design that product experience that it could kind of unlock all these different ways in value creation over time? It's more of that thought experiment, right? Is like, how does IP value expand? And I think Lost Realms is actually one of the coolest ones to kind of match this up here as well, right? Which is this idea of, how do we get these pieces to kind of tap in to a potential larger launch? Because our biggest goal here now is aligning with you guys, right? So Diamond will have a little bit of this initial alignment where they'll get to evaluate and review some of the major IP that's coming into our world. But at the same time, the larger community here is going to have greater access to. And I think this is kind of why I'm like really excited about a vision around Oath, and what Oath has continually brought back here as well, right? And I think that's going to be a pretty exciting thing here, to look at where IP can go and what that experiment is. But what we see with Lost Realms is that there's already pieces for like Mint 1, there's already pieces for Mint 2, and then there's another couple hidden mints within that as well, which is really cool. One of the other elements is that we've called this within the Oath ecosystem called like Project Icarus. That's kind of hidden there, where it's a dynamic unlockable mint based off the experience, and there's some like little game experiences here as well that kind of leads to some kind of cool outputs here. So there's a whole nother generative collection that is, yeah, that is kind of missing, but it's connected to definitely Wings. So there's a lot of cool layers that are still like we haven't really even showed in depth for the world of King's Oath and the world of Lost Realms. So as you can see, we're like building up to this, right? We're trying to get to a very strong understanding of this IP. But the other big thing now is like it's understanding the other IPs, right? That we also have. And this has been the advantage that we've been building, but also the disadvantage of, hey, we've just been aggregating IP. When does IP launch, right? And I think that's kind of interesting. And what we're all kind of are legitimately thinking, right, is where should this IP go? Where should, and what, yeah, channels should they be launching in, which is kind of interesting, right? And I think this is kind of the other interesting element, right, is that we can go into any direction, right? We could go into, brand new ecosystems. We could go into existing ecosystems, right? So there's all these layers that are going to be kind of be unlocked for the user. And hopefully over time, right, you guys are going to have the opportunity to just be able to get access to this. But right, as we built out this Lost Realms world, right, another world was starting to develop, and this is the world around Reapers. Reapers has been one of the IPs that, really was trying to go into another updated direction that was really pushing what I would say is the concept of, sci-fi and fantasy art. And in doing so, right, what was really interesting about Reapers was also thinking about smaller game experiences as well, right? And I think this is kind of an element that, when we look at how Reapers is kind of being played out, it started to lead to this kind of very interesting interactive experience, right? What were we kind of really excited about was this storytelling that was dynamically being told, seeing the world being built up. So Reapers has a whole nother activation kind of ready to go, which is kind of interesting. Man, O. Henry's already beating me to it. He's sharing some of the amazing pixel art. Same thing here with Zane here, showing some of the PFP pixel art for some of the initial characters too. We had this kind of live voting experience that allowed that Reaper IP to kind of really build up. But Reaper IP is still very internal, right? The only allocation of Reapers was given to people who were in the tribe server. So it allowed us to kind of bring a pool of people over there to kind of experience that and allow it to kind of build what we'd call as the Galactic Senate, right? That's what the first layer that we wanted to unlock. And in that unlock, right, of that, Galactic Senate, it created dynamic roles, decisions, and impacts to the entire world. So we've actually been dynamically building a whole storyline for Reapers to even continue forward on that, which will be revealed, right? There's the role of the Warlock that still has to be unlocked. So there's very interesting pieces as we started to build that. And again, when we were thinking about Reapers, we were thinking about two things. One is, what does a PFP look like that we're extremely excited about? And then separately, right, we are trying to think through, how do we actually get a hold on one sec. How do we actually create not only this playable PFP for users to really fall in love with, right? But how do we actually build it where you want to take these characters moving forward and make them a part of your world, make them a part of your design, and really bring this idea of kind of this Han Solo like vibe of the world here too. And we started to have a lot of fun with this, right? We started to put out a lot of different characters, a lot of different art pieces, a lot of different PFPs. And in doing so, it started to really resonate with our community. We also started to leverage a lot of AI for art creation for the secondary world that would essentially influence the pixel art world as well. And again, just led to greater connection, greater alignment, and greater value. The Reaper's world, I think, is one of the more special things because it showcases the ability for users to align in the co-creation. And when we say that, the other cool thing about that is that it meant that as co-creators who actually participated in the product experience, we could actually now give you guys that royalty share, right? Which I think is actually a really exciting opportunity for this entity, if Reapers were to be a project that we choose to prioritize as well. And when we think about the Reapers world, yeah, this is actually one of my favorite AI images as well. I know Zane loves one too. But it really, really kind of hits at the type of worlds we want to build. And I think that's exactly why, it's been really exciting to understand what Reapers wants to become, and more importantly, allowing it to be molded by a lot of you guys. I think Reapers has some of the most amazing flexibility, mainly because it's created by you guys. It's co-created by you in the visual on that, and it's allowing you, and this was kind of like the language you were using a while ago, right? The idea of like seizing your future, right? And I think this is kind of like a huge element here as well. By seizing your future here, we're going to be able to create a lot of opportunities for this market. Yeah, correct, guys. We did vote for Ronan 3 weeks ago. Ronan is still moving forward. We haven't even talked about Ronan yet, guys. We're talking about our next ETH mint here at the moment right now. I think it's very important to understand Ronan is on a different chain. Ronan is on BTC. So again, it's important to read the information above here as well. We're extremely excited about Ronan. Ronan is already in acceleration, and we could talk about Ronan here as well, right? Just for that context here, right, that is coming through for everyone on the BTC front, right? Because the vote wasn't for what are we prioritizing. The vote was, are we pushing forward with Ronin? So Ronin has been accelerated, so it's getting all of its art. And I think this is kind of the fun thing here, right? So like when we started to play around with Ronin, it started off with trying to find what the exact colors and visuals would be, and we started to play around with quite a few different things, right? So we were trying to figure out what would be the amazing, visuals and PFPs for these characters. And I think this is kind of where you started to recognize some of the visuals could be really cool. A lot of people love this basket head samurai that we were creating. And the vision here really is that how do we scale all of these pieces together, right, in this structure? And I think this is kind of the nice thing, is that we're going to be able to have a lot of interesting conversations on the priorities we want with each of these arts. But the reason why we think Ronin is incredibly special is we actually think pixel art is the way for ordinals. It's actually the only thing that you could get in true full resolution, in our opinion, without utilizing recursion, right? It's this idea of the meta of truly inscribing on chain an asset that lives forever, right, in its singular manner in full resolution. And this has always been the challenge for a lot of the BTC projects out there, right, is they usually have to down res their assets, right? And in down resing their assets here as well, right, you could usually see the quality drop off of what's actually inscribed. But with pixel art, right, depending on where and how you're optimizing for it, it could actually lead to some really clean visuals, right? And more importantly, you could actually inscribe it, right, very directly onto the chain. There is a little bit of cash, of course, needed to be able to, sorry, a little bit of fees needed, right, of that inscription size, right, is kind of the cost you're taking on. But aside from that, right, you have this ability to truly have something that is taking up real space, real size, and real value into the rodent ecosystem as well, right? So this is kind of where, the worlds that we start building have their own storytelling. And it's important to understand where each of these pieces are, right? For this kind of launch, for this kind of structure, and I think, it allows us to kind of start building out our story and hopefully building out what we think these mints can really be. We, of course, have our favorite amazing Venom like character with his tongue sticking out. I know Rain and them really love this one too. And I think it's kind of where, again, the storytelling and the connection of value comes in out of Ronin. And again, Ronin also has a lot of other interesting pieces behind this. Not only does it have these PFPs, it also has world art as well, right? Which is really cool, right? There's extended world art, there's clan structures within Ronin. There's already 9 disciples that are initially inscribed. This will be one of the few collections that has animation in it as well, which we think is also really interesting. And then, the other really compelling thing around Ronin is it's the idea of, building on chain a world with, what we call, or what we're leveraging from a technology perspective, is this parent child infrastructure. In the world of ordinals, there's some really cool ways to leverage some of the early ordinal technology in order to create true relationships and, true provenance between different assets. And this is kind of why we're giving all of these elements, right, coming out into this world for the world of Ronin. And, there's been quite a few other pieces that we've been working on with Ronin. One of the other elements that we've been working on here too has been really trying to get this beautiful, beautiful art to kind of showcase some of the other Ronin worlds too. So with Ronin, one of the other areas that we've been working on was thinking about, what would the actual visuals of the um Ronin clan towers, what would those look, right? And in those Ronin clan towers, right, it led to this kind of pretty special design. Let me see if I could grab that really quickly. I know Gokche was just working on these. Oh yeah, here we go, right? So this is pretty cool, right? Like if you want to see like what would the white disciples home clan look like, right? There is, these beautiful visuals of kind of this ancient Japan that you would want to be a part of and just see. So we have these kind of pieces. We're also thinking about other elements like swords and katanas and elements that can kind of bring the joy of where ordinals can go. I think Ronin is by far going to have one of the biggest opportunities for this community. And I think also the reason why is that Ronin is truly built around pushing forward, right? The opportunity in this kind of vision, right? And in this kind of market that, I think Ordinals has been really stale, right? In a lot of ways. So that's kind of the biggest thing, right? Is that how do you actually find the best way to impact a chain or tap into the meta and narrative of those chains. And that's what we're going to start showing you guys next week, because our goal is to actually give you more information on how we view the market opportunity in all these worlds. And then you guys will have a lot of influence on what you're seeking, what you're valuing, and where you're going. right? And that's kind of the biggest element here of what Tribe was trying to achieve, right? Is making sure that we had exposure on multiple chains and multiple opportunities to kind of push forward. And when you're looking at specifically excuse me, when you're looking at ordinal specifically, I think there is room for new narrative. Node Monkeys is showcasing just again a very interesting counter running incredibly well. The team at Inc on BTC is doing a great job on getting awareness there. That thing's going to do incredibly well. I think the key right now is that what's your storyline trying to come in on the ordinals front, and it could be really compelling. But again, like same thing. You should be looking at, and all of us should be aware what's happening on Sol, right? What's happening on Solana? What's happening on Arbitrum? What's happening on any of these L2s, Polygon, right, with Farcana's mint, all of these worlds are trying to give you significant insight and where the opportunities are going to be. Yeah, in regard to, where all of our pieces now are, is that, we have a couple other small elements as well. We have a soulbound mint that will be coming up as well, which will be our spirits. Those are just more of a representative mint for you guys being part of this world. But what we really want to get out there is that tradable asset. And that's what we're going to have more conversations on moving forward, in the upcoming weeks, and putting ourselves in position with new and hopefully exciting partnerships as well. And that's what we're trying to really work on, is figuring out where will all these pieces accordingly go and best have their upside accordingly. Because at this point, our biggest obligation now is giving back to you guys, right? Giving back even further and giving you a mint that represents the world that is being built. And that's really important to us. We want to resolve that. We want to be able to, of course, not just be accumulating art, but we want to start executing on that art, right? And I think that's kind of why it could be really compelling on that vision and on that opportunity. So, with all these different pieces, there's even a few hidden pieces, but we don't need to worry about those hidden pieces right now. What we want to now sit with and evaluate as a community together, over the next week and a half, is thinking through what are the projects and what are the ones that we want to bet on. So, for those of you who have whitelists for each of these projects, you're going to have a unique vote that will be unlocked for you. Separately, right, we're going to also give you real conversations moving forward next week that will break down the actual project launches for each of these. So you're actually going to get introduced to what we think is a slightly new launch strategy for King's Oath and Lost Realms. You're going to get a slightly new launch strategy for what we think Reapers can be, and you'll see a slightly new launch strategy as well for. We'll give you more of the update on where Rodin is, as Rodin's all activated as well. But we want you to be able to see that. And the reason why we're excited about, all of this is that Ronin is definitely going to be an opportunity for us to get exposure to the wonderful world of ordinals. But what I think is even more important, right, is being able to launch an asset that even more of you get access to, right? Which I think essentially is going to be a project like Oath or Reapers, right? Where they're slightly larger supplies as well. So this is kind of where I think the world of what we've been building now needs to make that sharp turn and be able to unlock into your favor, but you should also have a very clear understanding of what that launch cycle will be. The exciting thing about Ronin, right, is that Ronin has a very clear opportunity in the world of ordinals, but Ronin does have small costs tied to it, right? So it's not going to be explicitly a free mint, but it will be extremely low priced and will also have a lot more, guarantees on certain fronts to ensure that there's upside for all of you. But on the flip side, right, anything we do on the ETH front, right, is going to be completely free, right? Which is also a really interesting way of looking at the product opportunity as well. And again, maybe free versus not free is going to be the only thing you want to look at, but it is a variable for you guys to also consider, as and that's a major reason why we want to prioritize one of these ETH based plays for each and every one of you. So this is where we're getting the art ready, we're getting the plan ready, and we're reorganizing the pieces for a more faster and direct launch. Again, the goal is to get you guys art ASAP. That should be our goal with a proper launch. And then once we have that vision of our direct launches, then we can go into, marketing, partnerships, and allocations. This is kind of what we really want to ensure, is that we can find the right parties that are going to come with us on this journey and of course bring these IPs to life. So as we kind of step back, right, the now biggest thing that we want to understand is, how do we unlock this? How do we deliver this? And how do we communicate it? So what we're doing over the next 5 days is essentially building out the strategy. We're going to build out full complete launch packages for us to review. And the launch packages essentially should give you a good understanding of how we'll position it, what the general supply ranges will be, what the targets of the value here as well, right? It could be pretty exciting on that front. In regard to actual time frames, as Crypto Panda is asking, what would it be for Ronin or Oath in this case? I think for Ronin, you're looking at probably something that is 4 to 6 weeks out from right now. That's kind of what I would say the real timeline is. Essentially, you would want to do a really smart 4 week activation campaign, for the initial collection for marketing, like 3 to 4 week campaign. We have about 1 to 2 more weeks worth of work that needs to be set up. This is mainly curation. What's interesting, of course, on the ordinals front is that this is not truly generative in a smart contract manner because of the way we're inscribing, right? But this is kind of the important thing. Ronan was 4 to 8 weeks away 2 weeks ago, right? When the vote happened, right? So that's always been the numbers, Baba. So really important to stay with the right language. That's always so we're still within that window. Again, that vote only happened less than 10, 15 days ago. So, with that, right, our goal now is making sure that we can kind of unlock, the overall vision for all these pieces. On the Oath front, I would probably say that's more like a 6 to 10 week campaign. Realistically, on that front, Oath has a little bit more activation, narrative, and storytelling that needs to come together. It probably would take 1 to 2 weeks with our core team, but also at the same time, right, it would be also ensuring that we could get the right partnerships and collaborations here as well. Um, oh, sweet. Let me see. It looks like our boy Go Chicken joined up. Hey, man. He's sending me some new art here as well, which is really cool. And I think, like, very similarly, right, what I'm like most excited about here is, this idea of, all the pieces of art that we've been building. It all comes down to, how do we get Gokche's art out, right? That's what we really want. We want to build something that is truly for our community at every step of the way. And in doing so, right, it means that, how do we get our artists to also, like, tie and talk into this? So I think Gokche, let me see if Gokche's here yet. Ping him as well. There he is. Let me see. I think he'll be here in just a minute. And, I think this is kind of now the other thing here, is that we want to make sure that we stay, internally focused, right? And that's what this next week is help us, give us an opportunity on, where we're going, where we're scaling, and of course, driving the actual narrative here as well, kind of for the entire ecosystem as we build. So that's kind of what we're going to use, this next week for, right? We're going to be able to kind of leverage that, scale that, and share that. And again, what we're also still going to be as an entity, and this is the other half of the organization, right? The other half of this organization is absolutely going to be emphasizing, right, a element of knowledge and education, because that is what Tribe is still very core at. And this is kind of the difference between us and a traditional NFT project. We're not here to just build one NFT project and set it and go. Our goal is to help you core with, essentially align with your core storytelling here as well. right? And in doing so, that means that we really want to make sure that your Web3 journey is leveling up. So that means knowledge, that means access, that means whitelist, that means all of that. That's probably been the area that we've been incredibly strong at, probably the best at it as well. So this is kind of where we want to now like tap into those layers and of course get some really good answers across the board for this ecosystem too. So this is kind of why we'll have all of these things. Yeah, we'll still have something as minting or fresh mints. We're going to still have AMAs in different ways. We're still going to have allocations for you guys. The goal is there's still tons of you guys who have lots of relics, lots of opportunities. We definitely want to be feeding you guys in every way. That's our goal. We have some pretty cool partners here as well. This is kind of the other element that I'm really excited about is that we could kind of scale all of these pieces accordingly with you guys and really I think take you guys along this journey. I see Gokche's here. I'm going to bring up Gokche really quickly. Oops, there he is. And we'll kind of hear from him. I think one of the things that I've been really honored by working with Gokche with is thinking through all the different ways that we could kind of bring art to life in this world. Gokche, I'd love to hear, man. Gokche, we were just reviewing art from Lost Realms and Oath and all the PFPs we created. We went through some of the elements of the Reapers world and the Ronin world. I know we've been creating a lot. I know the Lost Realms world really came from a lot of your early soul and early ideas. Would love to hear kind of your thought process, man. Is that as you think through these franchises, right? What have they been kind of meaning to you and the team have been creating?
Well, uh, as you already know, I really love thinking through some universe, not just one character or just one PFP type or one just art style or something. But I like to think through like what could the universe look like? What could it include? What, for example, as with Reapers, for example, if these we started off with pilots, you remember, and then we moved on to ships, and then we moved on to the sidekicks, the animal and robot companions. But it wasn't like finish one first, then move on to another. It was like more like tied all together. Like this universe, what could it look like? What's the storyline here? We already also sketched ideas for cities, planets, you know, everything with that. Just like with the Lost Realms, King's Oath is also, of course, tied to the Lost Realms. It has just it had a storyline. Within we drew the world. We drew lots of different themes from the world and lots of characters. We wrote some stories for some of them. This is where it gets fun. It's not like, hey, let's draw a knight. It's um, it's 10% of the fun. The best thing is thinking through the story first, and then if there's a knight in the story, okay, what could this knight look like? Uh, it's a lot more creative when you think like that. So that's how I like to think. Of course, I'm because of my game developing background. I always think when we're designing the universes. Of course, I always think like there should be a game in this universe. I started off with some game ideas. With Lost Realms, it was like a turn-based RPG, like an endless kind of like roguelite sort of a strategy game where you start off with four characters, you level them up, you get them new abilities, some new equipment maybe, and you move through an adventure. And at some point you maybe die, but or like run out of health for all the characters, and then you have to start over. But you earn some stuff, some permanent stuff along the way, which is called like meta progression. Um, that was the basic idea with the game. We, of course, I don't know. It was. probably like over 1.5 years ago. We talked with you how the story would shape. You had some inputs on it. I had some inputs on it, and then we started to create visuals about it. Uh, this is how I like it. I mean, I want to think like everything connected with the world at once, not just like let's create one character. Okay, where do we go from here? Rather than okay, let's create a universe first, a storyline first, and then derive some characters out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been where it's been a really fun journey is think through kind of your storyline and your storytelling. It was just seeing how do we connect all these pieces together, right? And it kind of led to some really interesting outcomes, right? What I thought was probably the most interesting thing was utilizing these animations. So one of the my favorite animations from Lost Realms was this use of this portal, right? Because we built this whole dynamic story and it allowed us to kind of bring new characters into the world, right? We started to kind of break a little bit of the pure fantasy to bring in kind of the crypto native brand fantasy as well, right? Which I think is really cool. And at the same time, right, I think what's also like really compelling in this kind of story and in this kind of vision was this idea that we could keep adding into this, right? We could keep expanding into this. And I think that's kind of where, that heart of Lost Realms and Oath really scaled out, really started to push forward in its kind of visuals here too. Oh, I love that you kind of shared the little mini version of it as well. So, I know
Yeah.
Gokche, as you thought through like Lost Realms, we kind of have these PFPs and King's Oath, right? We have these kind of playable characters now in this kind of Lost Realms or Act Two. We've even messed around with cards and toys and a few other elements, which I think is also really exciting. So, kind of with all of those pieces, right? I think what's been really intriguing is that there's been like a full franchise put there together to kind of open up, which I think probably gets a lot of us excited because it's more about the who knows where the opportunities of where this brand can go, which I think is always a delightful area to be working with.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, as we started to build, one of the things I'm curious on in your kind of mindset is thinking through a little bit on, the Ronin. What's been really cool is that Ronin has, a very similar inspiration with the PFPs. And, now we've done this very, very large, samurai like collection. Just curious, what was your mind as you were thinking about the initial Ronin characters? We've taken this masked approach all the way through, which I think is awesome. Kind of allows people to kind of build their own identity. We've added a little bit of animation, but just curious, man, as you were building up the Ronin franchise, what was like exciting to you? What was driving you and your team through that design?
As you remember, we were like 80 or 90% done with King's Out when we started drawing, and we were drawing some Asian inspired characters, which included one of the one-on-one kings from the King's Out. And we were like, okay, this is like a whole different set of opportunities that King's Road itself doesn't really contain too much. King's Road itself, has lots of inspirations from lots of other mythologies and fantasies, etc. But there's very little inspiration from the Asian side of things. So we were like, okay, we really want to explore this. So um, initially, Mahmoud started off with a few samurai helmets, and I started off with some samurai masks. So we connected. Piotr drew some armors. Irena started off a bit of backgrounds, etc. We were like all exploring all around the thing. So and then we started to like try different combinations, um, try different colors, try materials, and then at some early point we started to write some simple basic of storylines with you, like different clans, different colors of armor, different they come from different schools, dojos, etc. And um, at one point we were like, okay, this is a whole different story. This is very much independent from King's Zone. So uh, and then it started to shape itself, its own art style, its own different set of animations. For example, Ronin doesn't have a weapon mostly, but it has like different assets. Most of the focus is on the uh, helmet and the armor. Um, so it was a really refreshing experience, and we studied lots of different books. We read lots of different historical stuff from different eras of the samurais. So it was an exciting journey, really, exploring that part of the history. And of course, we added some fantasy, our own fantasy in itself. When it comes to fantasy side of the Asian history side, it's a little bit unexplored. That's what we saw, at least. So we had some inspirations from different universes, even for example, like Mortal Kombat, um, some very old D&D stuff, etc. When we try to combine, we try to reimagine, for example, some animal masks, which started off not animated, but then we animated them as if they're like actual um, animal faces. Like when you kind of like make a real animal mask out of like something magic. So yeah, it was a really fresh playground for us. So we played it basically.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of where it's really fun. I just shared a few more visuals here, right? And I think this is kind of the other big thing, right? Is like with all these pieces, what's really cool is that this art always feels fresh. I just shared like four different outputs from the generative, right? Because the color is actually really cool, right? Is like there's this huge element to allow people to be a part of this and really design what I think these unique colors and art visuals will look like, but they'll actually tie to direct clans, right? And I think this is also going to be really cool is like team-based guilds. This is something that I haven't really seen done well yet in anything in Web3. There's people who tried to kind of add factions into their characters, but those factions couldn't really unlock, right? And I think this is kind of the other element, right? Is that we want to make sure that when we build all of these ideas, they should also feel fresh, right, to the market. And that's what we need to really spend time on over the next 5 days and next 7 days. It's thinking through how do we actually execute and build that narrative and build that story and build that product experience. And that's kind of the fun thing is that we actually have all of these places kind of all the art ready. It's now the story and the launch strategy, which is something that we can actually kind of scale up. So we have a lot of cool things that are coming out here that are going to kind of open up in this world. And I think this is kind of the other best thing about this structure is that it's going to allow us to be able to see all of these other conversations here as well. So we're going to keep this kind of process moving. And what we really want to get you guys a very good understanding of is what all the pieces are. So that's going to be the next thing next week, right? Is that we're going to show you all the visual layers, the visual components, and the launch strategy components for each of the projects, right? We should have a very transparent understanding of what all those elements are. And that means that you're going to have a very clear value proposition, right? Is that you're going to have this understanding that this market has so much rich opportunity still ahead. And we're still really excited on knowing where those opportunities can unlock. Because at the minimum, right, all we're trying to do is get beautiful art, right? Beautiful art in this world, right? On this front. And I think this is kind of why we want to tap back into what we did, right? Because we did shift, right? I think Burger's right here, right? Is like we shifted from storytelling, right, over into kind of, alpha, right? And access, right? Because that was the easiest way that we were able to feed our diamond community and our wider community, right? So what we're going to see is that you're going to see this interesting shift where we are going to be more story driven, especially as we get into these launches, and we're going to be building product experiences that tie into that. And that's the amazing thing, right? It's not just about, hey, how do we unlock you guys value by just being able to arbitrarily mint something because it's ready. It's how do we make this an actual fun way, right? Of launching this, right? And kind of scaling this out in the right direction. And that's going to be like our other element here as well. And for sure, we agree that minting assets would be there, but I think a lot of people have revisionist history as well. This market was dead, prior to November at this point. And I think that's also like something that a lot of people forget to recognize, right? As we move into a bull market, right? Don't get me wrong, we should have been faster to react into a bull market, but just anything minting in 2023 at that time was a death sentence, right? Most projects were marching back to zero post mint, right? So for us, what we're much more interested in figuring out now is that as these things have shifted, right, we should absolutely be optimizing more for storytelling. And we do have a market that is way more, sustainable, right? And way more healthy to an extent. And even when we're saying healthy, the healthiness isn't actually on the ETH side, to be very honest, right? The real health is actually on non-ETH plays at the moment right now. Like Sol and Ordinals are seeing outlier volumes there. Well, to be very transparent, you could actually argue some of the best outlier ETH NFTs are underperforming, right? If you're actually looking at this, like this is also like a very interesting thing to kind of bring up here real quick, is recognizing like, oh wow, like if you actually look at the floor price of what is, like let's look at the floor price of Node Monkeys right now, right? If you're familiar with Node Monkeys, it's kind of in one of the more hype mints recently. It's currently sitting at a 0.28 BTC floor, minted out at 0.03, so huge win across the board, right? Into ETH. So when you look at that, you realize that a 0.28 BTC floor means that this is a 5 ETH asset on ordinals right now. On a 10K collection, they have an over 5 ETH floor, right? Which is crazy. And do you realize the most hyped asset on ETH at the moment right now that has a token with a somewhat comparable supply of 6,000 being Overworld is only at 2 ETH? Right? It's actually really, really interesting of what you're seeing is that a lot of the ETH cap, the ETH ceiling is capped, right? And with Overworld having still such a small volume and still super, low listings, what you're seeing is that it's actually not correlating as well as you would think in this kind of healthy market. If we were seeing like a comparison to Node Monkeys, which literally Node Monkeys has nothing right in their roadmap at the moment right now. Don't get me wrong, I think they did a great job with the collection. What you have here is that you're just having the awareness and attention right now on a lot of these other chains that's driving a lot of that, availability and this belief of, being early and provenance. It's very fascinating. The fact is that, yeah, zero roadmap is absolutely the play, but you're seeing that on the ordinals front, and it's massively outpacing a lot of the ETH projects. So it's just kind of really interesting, right? And I do agree. I think Overworld is still undervalued at this point, but that's actually the challenge. Is a lot of ETH projects are technically undervalued because the market is seeing more fun on other areas, right? Like another interesting data point here, and we'll kind of wrap up. We've already given out the rolls, so if you need to run, no worries. We auto rolled you guys about 15 minutes ago, so you do have it. We'll kind of wrap up here really quickly, though. The interesting thing, right? One of the biggest data points that we were looking at is that we were talking to a few teams to understand what does the shitcoin delta look like between between ETH and Sol. And right now, what we've seen is Sol has eaten into that completely. What's crazy is Sol is right now 10x more volume than ETH, right? When it comes to shit coins, which we've never seen before. So that's actually driving a lot of the Soul activity, right? And they're literally playing, yeah, all the way through this memes kind of opportunities to move over to, yeah, a cheap chain, which is very intriguing. So you have a cheap chain there, then you have this very interesting thing about ordinals kind of going, right? Which is, I think, also really compelling. And with ordinals now, what you're seeing is that ETH is actually the thing that is being undervalued. And I think that's right now being undervalued because I think there's so many projects that are trying to update and trying to build the vision around a token. And we haven't really seen the conviction on a token after grapes kind of coming a little lukewarm. It was still very good. I mean, it's crazy what the bias is in Web3, right? It's very easy to be like, oh, we only got a 4x. I'm like, wow, you got a 4x in 2 months. Congratulations. That is like the greatest return window. But of course in Web3, right, it's not enough. They want gen wealth. They want the 10x. So it'll be interesting to see if Overworld can carry that through, because that's what I think this entire market is evaluating. Is can the token meta sustain, right? We know what meme land was able to do with meme coin, right? But does this actually extend to all the other pieces? It's very fascinating to see how it goes. And I agreed. I think we want to look at Prana and sorry, looking at the Well token, right? We want to be able to keep an eye out on Farcana on the Polygon side. You want to really be able to kind of take on a much stronger story on whether or not tokens will make it to the finish line. So, we're looking at that, we're evaluating that, try to understand all of these pieces here too. I think there's a lot of good things that we could learn, build, and scale from here. And that's kind of what I want to kind of see what's going on. I think token plays on ETH are undervalued at the moment right now because the rest of the market's more exciting. So I think Overworld, if you believe Overworld's getting Binance, right? Like there's no way that Overworld in any reasonable manner should be under 3 ETH. It really shouldn't, right? So like it feels that it's incredibly undervalued there, but the challenge, right, is like, is it going to be communicated correctly? Is it going to drive correctly? It's tough. It really is tough. And this is kind of the stuff that we're also going to start sharing here as well. So, like, we're going to see where this opportunity is going to kind of go long term. Yeah, Saita says token plays are confusing me right now. Should you save the liquid for a private sale of the token or invest in the NFT itself? I think the challenge right now is it's going to come down to vesting terms. And this is the reason why the token market on ETH feels uncomfortable. We're all trying to like figure out and assume that the vesting and tokenomics will be in our favor, even though we don't have data on that, right? Like Overworld's tokenomics are not out, so we don't know what we're vesting. So the way you almost have to look at the math in most cases, and the way I've seen a few of the like alpha group leaders have been doing it, they're trying to find projects that have, of course, more unlock at TGE, right? That's kind of what you want. So the challenge is right, is like, where can that vesting be? And the truth is, yeah, I think you're exactly right, Saida. It's just really trusting teams don't fuck the community with bad vesting. And that is a real challenge, right? It is a real challenge in this market. And it is a real struggle as well as you kind of think about this vision long term. So this is also why we want to reflect and evaluate that. One of the other things that we've been really trying to understand is how do you now bring in those users into your community, and how do you align them for with either an NFT or with a token? And I think the actual token meta is hurting the ETH market because we're all in a wait and see mode. Because if you don't have token, it's really hard to pump. And if you do have token, then there's multiple questions on the tokenomics there as well. So it's this kind of very strong, very interesting struggle here between the consumers on ETH. And this is actually why I think it's very exciting on what's happening on ordinals and other chains at the moment right now. Just so much cool stuff being built. So, guys, this is kind of the stuff that we're going to be sharing as well next week with more details. Essentially, right, what you'll see on the event schedule is that we'll also be talking about market reflections next week. We're going to be breaking down how each of these chains work, right, and what's succeeding in each of these chains. Primarily, we're going to be looking at, ETH, Sol, and ordinals at the moment right now, just so that we can understand where the volume is going. So you definitely join in for that. And then additionally, we're going to have another show called Token Play, where we're going to be breaking down like the variables you want to see in a good token launch. And we're going to be breaking down Overworld and probably one other project here that has, meaningful information. So in that session, right, what we're going to show is very clearly a good understanding of what information do we have, what information is missing, what are the risks and upside against those as well. And again, that's just giving you guys a better framework, because here's the thing that we all need to look at, as we're here in Web3. It's how do we get exposure to all of these plays? How do we build a portfolio with the type of risk that we're willing to manage and sustained? Because again, we really want to be able to give you guys more access to those plays, right? So one of the things we're looking at is how do we get you guys more access to token plays? How do we get you guys more access to all these other layers? I think that could be really exciting, and also more importantly, help you guys in your journey. But with that, you should also be able to get a really good insight, right? Is recognizing where this market is going to be going for our own projects too. And once we could be able to have those conversations and kind of meet in the middle, right? I think you're just going to see a significantly better vision and a better market here too. So, guys, I hope you could see a little bit more of like how we're striking and building out the verticals and our prioritizations in our language. We're turning the key here in that direction, and of course trying to find the right answers. We're going to have you guys participate in that as well to help guide us. It's not a DAO structure by any means. It's rather a co-collaboration structure, no different than how we kind of built out with Reapers. We've really found a lot of good ways to get that information from you guys, and we're going to activate you guys for that. But also, you should drive this journey because it's being built for you, right? That's kind of the amazing thing. It's being built for you, and it's being built for our artist, the artists behind this project as well. So, Kokche, man, always appreciate you here. I know you've still been cooking a lot of new stuff, so we'll have some cool stuff to share here shortly, man. But really, really appreciate you kind of sharing your vision, man, sharing what you're doing, sharing where this entire market is going as well.
Thank you, man. I'm really excited to build all the new stuff, especially with the new cyberpunk world, etc. So I'm really excited to share some of the new visuals we've been doing.
Yeah, it'll be really cool, man. And I think saying that even more of the Reapers world has a lot more that I'm really pieces together. Guys, we really appreciate you hearing, sitting, evaluating, visualizing with us. We'll have a lot more updates coming in. Again, we're always here active in the chat. And then additionally, right, we're going to make sure that we're going to be getting quite a few more content pieces and updates coming across the board. So should be coming all to you guys relatively quickly. But with that, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you guys there on Monday as well. Bye-bye now.
See you.
Oh, don't worry, Diamonds. We'll give you raffles over our raffles. Don't worry, we got you guys.